Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to get everybody to take their seat. Is that good? Are we good on the? Okay. Yeah, we'll let our speakers join us on stage. So, welcome, everyone. Welcome to the release of the Regional Resiliency Action Plan for Northeast Florida. I'm Beth Payne, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Northeast Florida Regional Council. And so, certainly on behalf of our Board of Directors, the Regional Council is so proud to release this document. And we really see this as the culmination of a commitment that our region has towards stronger and resilient communities. But I think most of all, what we really are here to do today is to celebrate this accomplishment. I think what we realized certainly at the Regional Council is that we couldn't do this without all of you and without all of the people who participated in this effort. And just speaking to a former board member, Ms. Roxanne Horvath, it's just amazing what we can do when we do it together. Certainly the processes are difficult and hard, but they're much harder alone than they are when you come together and you collaborate around something as important as resiliency. So again, we want to thank each one of you for your role in making this happen. We want to thank our steering committee and certainly our co-chairs who we could not have done this without. Our fantastic resiliency staff at the council has pulled this off. But of course, after today, we want to see you all again as we work towards our next milestone, which is implementation. We recognize that continued support and engagement shouldn't end in this process, and we really can only see this through if you and your colleagues and the people you work with continue to engage in efforts like this. So with that, we thank you for all the work that you do in making Northeast Florida more resilient, and I will turn it over to Farah to get the program started. So thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you, Beth, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're really, really excited, as Beth said, and as you can probably tell. Just a few things before we get started. My name is Farah Ilami. I'm the Regional Resiliency Manager here at the Northeast Florida Regional Council. And I do want to say that I looked at the registration list and we have a very wide variety of affiliations. We even have some students and interns. So thank you for coming, you interns and students. Let's give a round of applause to them. All right, and then I also want to mention that about half, a little less than half, of the registrants were actually members of Resilient First Coast, which means that over half of you are not members yet, but you can be members, and we are so excited that you decided to join us today in celebrating this achievement. And then also, I do want to mention that we will be doing photos and that we are recording this meeting. And please, if you don't mind silencing your phones, and also if you do need to use the restroom, there are restrooms just down the hall over here, and then on the opposite side of the building, on the east side of the building, there are restrooms as well. If you don't mind, please holding any questions you have, because we do want to give our speakers plenty of opportunity to speak uninterrupted. The order of the program is listed on your program there. We will be opening up with these are the opening remarks, and then we have our 4 featured guest speakers, and then we'll be going over the overview of the Regional Resilience Action Plan, and then we'll be having some closing remarks and next steps moving forward. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our first speaker. We have Mr. Eddie Boza from the Florida. He is our Chief Resilience Officer for the state of Florida. We are very excited to have him speak. He has also worked with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Resilient Florida program as the director of the program. And I think he's got a lot of great insights to give to you all today. So let's welcome Mr. Eddie Boza.
I almost just want to talk. I don't know. I think you guys can hear me, right? Sometimes I'm called a loudmouth, so I don't know if I need the microphone, but I'll do it for the program and maybe, I guess, for the recording. Good afternoon. I wanted to first thank the council for asking me to come talk today and make some remarks. Happy to be here to show support from the state of Florida about the efforts that are ongoing. It seems like it was only not too long ago, I came over for a council meeting and gave a presentation on the Resilient Florida program back in, I think it was probably 2021. And so that was kind of like one of the first things that I went on the road to do for this program. And so it's kind of neat to be back and be around and to see all the successes. Obviously, part of this project is funded through the Resilient Florida program. It's, if you're not aware of the program, it's primarily a grant program to assist local governments with planning and implementation of flood reducing projects or projects that are going to combat sea level rise. And we do have a planning component in the program. So we can do planning grants to local governments or special districts to help assist with those efforts. So the program also has a set aside for regional resilience entities. We call them RREs. And the council is one of those that has engaged with the program. We've worked across the state, including Resilient Tampa, from the Emerald Coast all the way down to the Southeast, with vulnerability assessments, assisting local governments with technical assistance, or conducting work on behalf of the local governments. So, you know, I'm really excited to hear from the practitioners how this plan and their own plans are devised and implemented. The RRAP sort of establishes a very clear and actionable pathway to regional resilience by outlining these specific strategies that are tailored to this region. So I think the most important takeaway that I have is this plan, you know, doesn't aim to operate in isolation. It's meant to be built on. It helps to align some of the local and regional planning with some of the state priorities and goals. And I feel that it creates a cohesive strategy that's locally grounded and applicable, and also represents a way that other regional groups can use as a model. So, you know, the people that we're going to hear from later today are sort of actively shaping and implementing these policies, and the RRAP really complements their work in the communities and how that work can evolve over time, working with local governments. I also wanted to mention there's a lot of partners that we won't hear from today, like organizations like the Florida Housing Coalition, the Florida Native Plant Society, UF-IFAS, UF Fiber, Urban Land Institute, FDOT, USACE, NOAA, you know, all these different partners contributing to not only developing this plan, implementing the plan, but I think that all of that involvement really reflects that it's a statewide priority and goal for this type of work. We've also got other states that are looking to Florida. So this is a great example of how a regional group can really capture their attention of their local governments. Groups like the Silver Jackets with the Army Corps, Pew Charitable Trust, it's a Washington sort of think tank, but they're stepping into statewide resilience, and they've been hosting with American Flood Coalition is another nonprofit bipartisan group. They've been hosting states and state leaders and resilience officers at the national level. So they're all looking to us as well. Florida has invested nearly $2 billion in this work since 2021. I know of other states that have set up their statewide resilience plans, and they've on a log scale less than what Florida is doing. So this RRAP really helps advance that interdisciplinary model that ties together the science and the policy and infrastructure and engaging communities. So it's a great starting point, but it's also a good springboard to continue. So I want to thank the council again for their partnership with Resilient Florida and in a Resilient Florida, because together we're not just responding to those challenges, we're helping to shape the future of Florida and to see that resilient future from here and beyond. So just want to say thanks again, and I'll turn it back over to Farrah.
Thank you so much. All right, our next speaker is also a Chief Resilience Officer. He is with the St. Johns River Water Management District. He is also a member of our Resilient First Coast Steering Committee and a member of our Environment Subcommittee. So he's been very involved in the work that we've been doing here at Resilient First Coast. And I just realized that I forgot to forward the slides, and now they're not going. Let me see, give me just a second. We have help on the way. Let's see.
They're really going to be disappointed in my slide.
Sorry about that. I don't know. Okay. There we go. All right. So this was Eddie's slide. I was supposed to introduce him with his slide, and this was going to be his backdrop. But without wasting any more time, we're going to move forward with Tom Frick. And I'm going to give him the, okay, and we'll move forward to his slide.
Thank you, Farah. And this is my slide, the one and only one. So yes, oh wait, it went out. All right. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate being here, being invited to talk about this. So I think Farah asked me to read the first 100 pages of the plan. So everybody have their, oh, no? Okay, well, anyways, we'll talk a little bit about it. Again, I'm Tom Frick. I'm with the St. Johns River Water Management District. How many people here are familiar with the Water Management District? Okay, everybody, so I don't have to tell you 18 plus counties that we touch all the way from way down there, Indian River County, all the way up to Nassau. So it's a big area, but an important one for us is here in Northeast Florida. Obviously, our headquarters are up here in Palatka, so down in Putnam County. But really, we do a lot of work up in this area. And today I really wanted to kind of focus on not just the RRAP itself, but kind of how it integrates with the diversity of Northeast Florida. You can kind of see here on the map, we've got a lot of diverse communities that we're talking about. So we've got the 4 coastal counties there, Flagler up to Nassau County, and we've got inland counties, and 5 of those counties have the St. Johns River that runs through it. So we're talking about a lot of communities with a lot of different, we'll call them issues or concerns that are happening out there, different ways that we want to be resilient in those areas. So it's a lot of unique opportunities. We like to put that out there, but that really is trying to engage on some of the challenges as we grow in here. So not only are we talking about just geographically different, but I mean just different in all these communities. How many? 43% of the north of these communities are agriculture. Think about that. I'll let that sink in. Agricultural resilience, huge to this area, and that's one of the things that most of us, when we're thinking of being resilient, probably isn't at the forefront of where those resilience need to be, but it's something that's talked about and addressed in this plan. But we're looking at other areas that have to be. We're talking about military installations, big in this area. You're talking about the hospitals and the medical community, again, manufacturing. There's a lot of different communities out there from suburban to urban that we really have to work with and deal with, and they're all going to do things a little bit differently. And so I think that's one of the big strengths of the plan that's put together that you've all have seen, is it allows the communities really to kind of pick and choose, decide what they want to work on, and also where they are in their resilience world. I know some of these communities, you're talking about the person that's dealing with stormwater is also, has many, many other hats on. So they're dealing with other infrastructure. Then you have other communities where they have an opportunity to have a resilience officer and have staff to be able to work on that. So it's really important that these communities can come together and talk and learn from one another. And I think that's really the biggest advantage here for the RRAP and the collaborative. And so with that, I really want to thank the council, the regional council, for showing the leadership, bringing together Resilient First Coast, bringing this diverse group together, and putting together a plan that everybody can work off of. So it's that sort of unified, bringing these diverse folks together, that's really important. To me, this was really, I think, the crucial part of the plan, and probably the strength of the plan, is it looked at the different areas, really tried to identify what was important to coastal communities, was looking at communities that had been around for how many hundreds of years, Jessica? along, right? A few hundred years, and also looking at communities that were getting, thousands of people in every year. Some of those communities are the same one. Um, but we're talking about areas that have been around a while, are established, and are also growing quite a bit. So this idea of being resilient and being able to plan is just super important for those. So really I looked at the plan, and really there were three things that really jumped out as far as the importance. And one was this sustained discussion about resilience. And as I mentioned, this diverse community was brought together, this collaborative to really discuss and put the plan together. And so that development, those discussions were really key. That was sort of the first thing I think that was really important about the plan. Secondly, this also is going to be a big resource for a lot of the communities that we're talking about. So as I mentioned, some of the communities are in different spots. Some of them have the expertise and have experts, and you'll hear from some of them later on, who've been doing this a long time. And in other communities, this is very new. So being able to learn from each other, being able to identify where these resources are, that's really, really important. And I think that this has been really facilitated extremely well, putting together the RRAP and with the Resilient First Coast, with the collaborative itself. So I think that really is one of the really important things out there. And then lastly, the third thing, I think this is a way to deal with regional vulnerabilities. And so you'll see some of the regional vulnerabilities that are in there, but this is things that go across jurisdictional boundaries, and two that are really near and dear to my heart at the Water Management District. We've got 4 core missions, but 2 of those missions, one's water quality, and this plan talks about water quality, and I think there's a recognition that whether you're on the coastal communities or you're talking about the St. Johns River, water doesn't have any boundaries, right? We're getting problems that are coming from upstream. You're getting things that are coming in on the coast, whether that's algal blooms, and a lot of us have dealt with that. So that idea of trying to address water quality, and if you think about it, it's really important because without that, and I've seen this in other areas within the Water Management District, especially in the Indian River Lagoon, where if you have algal blooms and you start having mortality events with things like manatees and such, people don't want to live there. And we know people want to move here to Northeast Florida, and a lot of that is to try and keep these resources in good health and to keep improving them. The other thing is water supply. This is something that goes across all the regions. 80% of the water that we use for drinking water is from the Floridan aquifer. We all use that across our jurisdictions, and that's another thing that the Water Management District really is focused on, is that resilience and sustainability of our water supply. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is ecologically. We don't want our wetlands to dry up. We don't want to have our lakes drying up like they have been in a few areas. And we've been putting projects in place for the resilience and the restoration of those areas, but also for growth. So trying to figure out where these communities can grow economically. You can't do that if you can't provide water to folks. So that's another very important thing. So those regional vulnerabilities are important. It's something that I'm glad it's reflected in the plan, and it's something that's important for everybody across the diversity in our region. So I say that today really truly is a milestone. This isn't the completion. We've been talking and working on this plan and having this discussion for the last, 2 years now? A little over 2 years. And so this is really, those conversations are going to continue. So that's very important. So while a lot of these actions are going to be focused on the collaborative and the people that are going to those collaborative meetings, really it's going to be for the success of the entire Northeast Florida region. So with that, I thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so our next speaker is also a Chief Resilience Officer. this time from the city of St. Augustine. Ms. Jessica Beach is, in addition to being the Chief Resilience Officer, she is also one of our Resilient First Coast co-chairs. She's also our Infrastructure Subcommittee lead. And in addition to that, she's been featured in publications and has lots of forward-thinking work in the city of St. Augustine, which is a very frequently flooded city. So with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Jessica Beach.
Thank you, Farah. Yes. We've been forced in this arena, not by choice, but just given our location, our nation's oldest city. We're a low-lying coastal community. So when I started with this city a little over 8 years ago, my first week on the job, our public works director at the time said, you need to get a Tide app on your phone and you need boots up to here. And I was like, what did I just get into? And she was not kidding, because the first week that I was there, we had a rain bomb event, floods the downtown. We just had a coastal event just like a little over a week ago where we had high tides, nor'easters, and rainfall. It's a compound flood event. So we have been living and dealing with this for a number of years. It's not new to us. But I was very excited when Farah joined the Northeast Florida Regional Council. We met, I think it was 2021, December. She came to the city offices. We got to chat. She was listening to kind of some of the struggles and the challenges that we're facing. And she's like, guess what? We're going to try to do a collaborative. I'm like, oh, that's wonderful, because we need that. South Florida has a great model. They're ahead of the curve. They've been doing this for years. And so I've been kind of following what they've been doing. But we were lacking kind of that organizational structure to pull all the different stakeholders together and try to leverage our resources. And that's why we need a regional resilience collaborative. You know, here as the city of St. Augustine, you know, we're kind of forging through and trying to do different things, but we're not alone. Other communities are facing very similar challenges, so we're here to help and leverage that, but we're also learning from other communities that are doing it better than us, or they've come up with innovative ideas. So really it's leveraging all those resources in our region and trying to pull those together so we have those improved outcomes. We're able to share those best practices. We're really able to maximize the value of what we're doing already and provide us a sound voice. And I think the one thing lessons learned from the South Florida area is when they were going to Washington, D.C. or even Tallahassee, they kept hearing the same types of challenges, but it's from different stakeholders. If we can combine and collaborate and have a unified voice, I think that carries more weight and leverage, especially when we're trying to compete for limited resources. And so, again, all of these things help us make a more resilient future for all of us that's involved with that too. So when we first started the collaborative back in 2022 is when we officially launched it. It was Roxanne Horvath. Roxanne, you have to raise your hand. She was our one of our commissioners at the time and former vice mayor for City of St. Augustine, and she was one of the pioneers, I will say, for our resilience efforts in St. Augustine. She was our original steering committee chair when we put together the Resilient First Coast. So this collaborative, it's over 400 organizations that are represented. It's local governments, municipalities of all different scales. You've got nonprofits, different federal, state stakeholders as well. So it's a very representative of our area. And so we put together a steering committee. Roxanne was leading the initial charge as we were trying to organize ourselves and figure out, well, how do we do this? Because it has been done in other parts of the state, and we did look at other examples like in Tampa Bay, Central Florida, but we needed something that's going to represent our region. And so as we started the process and meeting, we had a steering committee that was a much smaller kind of focus group. Our current steering committee has 19 members, and they represent all the different cross-cutting the disciplines there. We found 4 main themes that resonated with our region, and these are defined as pillars, where we've got our environment. That was very important to all the different 7 counties. Quality of life was really important, in addition to economics, and then obviously infrastructure. So we came up with these pillars that we developed, and as we were working our way through our Regional Resilience Action Plan, the phase 1, I'll talk about that in a minute. Again, we've kind of touched a lot of this. You heard Tom and also Eddie mention, you know, we're trying to leverage resources. It's across the region, but it can also be custom to that municipality, so not a one-size-fits-all. So it's very diverse, and we were really trying to be able to bounce back from shocks and stressors, and there's different shocks and stressors depending on where you are. And so for us, being able to achieve our regional resilience, this is really important. And again, I had touched on like leveraging best practices and lessons learned. we're not alone in this. This entire state of Florida is under different shocks and stressors and challenges on that. And not only, I think Eddie had mentioned too, other states are looking at our state or how we're doing these things. So this is not unique, but we can learn from other partners throughout. And again, we want to make sure everything's based on sound science and regional data that's specific to our area, so we're able to make those informed decisions, and also being able to scale this up or down depending on where you are. So there's many, many benefits of a regional resilience action plan. And I did want to touch a little bit about kind of the stressors and shocks that we have. It's a pretty comprehensive all hazards plan, and it's very diverse, and we really wanted to look at everything. Tom had mentioned agriculture and water quality, water supply. Those are all things that are important to our region, but these are definitely lists of shocks and stressors that we deal with to a different degree, just depending on where we are. But what came to the top were three primary, what we're calling significant regional hazards that were resonating throughout all of the 7-county region. And so for us, that's our photo on the top from Hurricane Ian. That's downtown St. Augustine. Flooding is probably our biggest challenge with that. Heat. I was just at the 10X Convergence last week, and it was really interesting to hear along the I-10 corridor all the way from California to Florida, we're probably not as affected, but extreme heat is real. Like listening from folks from Arizona, California, different parts of the country. Those are definitely things that we need to be looking at and thinking about too. And I know City of Jacksonville's already looked at some of the heat challenges as well too. And then obviously hurricanes, because that's not new to our state. But these really rose to the top, and there's different vulnerabilities that drive these different shocks and stressors. But ultimately, as we are on this journey, and we kind of alluded to, we're not done. We're celebrating today, but there's still a lot of work to be done. When we started our initial collaborative days, when we first formed back in 2022, we really focused on this phase 1, goals, objectives, what are some best practices, and then that lead us into completion of that phase 1. And at the end of that, we had a really good foundation and framework that was based off of it. We had lots of subcommittee meetings, all of the different pillars. We had leads in those, and we had lots of meetings and ideas and different discussions. All of that information was taken and synthesized to really set us up for the second phase that I'm going to let Ann talk about, and Farah too. So they're going to go a little bit more detail on the plan. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, we have our final guest speaker. Also, guess what? A Chief Resilience Officer, this time from the city of Jacksonville. She has won an award for the Resilient Jacksonville strategy and has contributed a lot of knowledge to our Resilient First Coast action plan. In addition to that, she is one of our co-chairs of Resilient First Coast, and her and her team have contributed greatly to the writing and putting together of this document, and I will hand it over to Ann.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Colanisi. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer in Jacksonville, as you just heard, and really happy to be here. I will say it feels maybe not fair to say I'm a co-chair, because I was a co-chair for a lot shorter a period of time than Roxanne, and Roxanne really carried the bulk of this. I'm going to share kind of this second phase of work, because this is really where I and my team plugged in. We had just gotten off of publishing Resilient Jacksonville, thinking about all the things that could affect Jacksonville. And really, once you've done that organization of a big, complex document once, you might as well do it again. So we thought we'd jump in and really try to take the breadth and depth of work that had already been done and help with the organization. So one of the first things that we wanted to kind of take a step back and dig into was, what is a regional resilience action plan? What should be in it? What rises to a regional level? I think we're all familiar with the idea of cities and counties having resilience plans. That's been kind of on the rise in the last decade. It's become more and more common. But really, thinking about a regional player and what their role would be is still fairly new. And I think one of the things we knew from the jump is we wanted to make sure this wasn't duplicative. There's a lot of work that has to happen at the county level. There's a lot of work that has to happen at the state level. And there's a lot of direct interaction between the state and counties that we didn't want to disrupt by putting a regional player in between. We didn't want to add an extra step in the process. But we did feel that there's value in having somebody looking at the region and working very intentionally at the regional level The fact is, we have a fantastic resilience strategy in Jacksonville. We're very pleased with it. If every county in Northeast Florida, every city in Northeast Florida had one, why would the sum of the parts not be a whole? That's what we really wanted to dig into. And we found that there are questions that we could ask at the regional level. If a county other than Duval wasn't managing their forests and had a wildfire, the smoke from that fire could affect my residents. So I need somebody else at a higher level to be making sure that we're all working in the same direction. Similarly, a lot of other counties don't have, direct influence over the airport here in Jacksonville, but their residents are probably flying through Jacksonville's airport, so somebody needs to be keeping tabs for them on a day-to-day basis. A staff member in St. Augustine doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, but we want to make sure that we're doing that. And similarly, a lot of people who are using our airport here in Jacksonville may be visiting the historic fort down in St. Augustine, so how is that historic asset really being protected? There are these intricacies that we felt really emerge as we were doing the planning process and all of the great work with the steering committee. What you see in front of you in this document is really the culmination of 3 years of work. But to actually get this document published was about an 8-month push. And really starting back in January, there had been so much discussion from the subcommittees, and we really felt, okay, we have to get something on paper. And so a lot of time was spent making sure all of these ideas found their way into a neat organization for the document, writing the actions, getting partners to sign on. And although we are publishing it here today, we also are really expecting that there will be a third phase where we figure out, how are we measuring this? How are we going to be able to communicate success of this? We didn't want to postpone publishing it until we figured out the metrics, because there's a lot of implementation work that can already be started, but that's an important piece, is how are we going to be reporting on it? So you heard from Jessica a bit about the 4 steering subcommittees that were set up, and really in January, we took a step back and we said, wow, there are dozens and dozens of pages of notes that have been generated, and lots of conversations. How do we make sure that all of this found its way into the final document? And we really wanted to dig into who should be benefiting from this, that local governments, regional entities, and people outside of the public sector, businesses and nonprofits, academia, all had a place in this. But I like to say a document without an author, or a document that's written by everyone for everyone, isn't really able to accomplish as much. So we really did want to drill down into who is writing this. It's the Northeast Florida Regional Council, but really the key implementers are the Regional Council, members of the First Coast Collaborative, and those partners who are agreeing to participate on certain actions. What we can do is say, this is what we as regional players are going to do to improve resilience. And then the beneficiaries are counties and all of those entities that we mentioned on the previous slide. One thing that we spent a lot of time on is really, what is our vision for Northeast Florida, and what would it mean for this area to be resilient? You heard from Jessica that this was an all-hazard strategy. That was an important distinction that we made. And we also felt it was important that we not just respond to hazards, but also see this document as an opportunity to set our region up to thrive. So not just adapt, but adapt to thrive. And the 4 kind of main goals that emerged were creating a durable and adaptive built environment, thinking about how we minimize disruption, minimize damage when we do have a shock, thinking about ensuring a vibrant quality of life, making sure that people have the resources that they need to rely on, developing a thriving regional economy, really thinking intentionally about growth. We're so fortunate to be poised for substantial growth here in Northeast Florida, and let's make sure we're prepared for that and we're able to meet the moment. And then the 4th is promoting a healthy natural environment, really seeing ourselves as good stewards, and the connection between healthy environments and healthy communities. And what all of that organization led to was 34 actions and 83 sub-actions that outline the ways in which we can be resilient and set up for success in the coming decades. I'm gonna let Farah give you some examples of those actions, but before she does, I wanted to talk a bit about how we structured it. We spent a lot of time thinking about, again, what makes something regional in nature. and kind of three buckets of work emerged. The first was really there's a role for someone to facilitate better resilience throughout Northeast Florida, thinking about an action that could impact multiple counties, and how is there a third party, somebody who's able to see that wide angle lens and really pull people together, thinking about resource sharing and how we might improve the work that we all do collaboratively. The second bucket is guide, making sure that every county is starting from the same place. Nobody's having to start from scratch on any of these things. So pulling together best practices and case studies. If one county has tried a pilot of something new, making sure that all of the other counties are getting those lessons learned and are able to kind of more quickly operationalize these concepts. And then the third and final bucket was analyze, thinking about data that all counties need, and what's the role of a regional entity in collecting that data, generating that data, disseminating it. I think a really great example is extreme heat. We have heat data here in Jacksonville. Let's make sure every county is using similar data sets so that we can actually track how the entire region is working. And there's a lot of ways in which counties are not set up to be the ones generating that data, but nonetheless need it to make decisions. So these were the three buckets that emerged, and we felt like that gave us a really strong foundation to say there's a regional need here. There are steps that the region and the collaborative and its partners can take. And with that, I'm going to pass things back to Farah to give you some examples from the document. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. All right, now for the unveiling of the document, if you haven't already looked at it, which I'm sure some of you have. So I'm going to be giving a little overview, and I'm just going to point out a few highlights. As was mentioned, this is it's a 100-page document. We are not walking all the way through this document today. But I do want to first point out how to read an action. So in the book itself, this page also is in the plan. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things about what is in every action. So the first paragraph sort of establishes the background and the need. Why was this action even put in this plan to begin with? What was the need for it? The second paragraph and the subsequent paragraphs there are sub-actions. So some actions have one or two sub-actions, some have up to 6. So these sub-actions are where we really get into the nitty-gritty of what are we going to do. And they have a description, and then we define what the collaborative will actually do in order to achieve that action or sub-action. It also, some of them highlight ongoing work. So some of these actions we've already started on, which is wonderful. And that also, some of these have examples from elsewhere outside of our region, and those are also highlighted within the description of the sub-actions as well. And then last but absolutely not least is the implementation partners. On every page, we spent countless hours reaching out to all of our potential implementation partners, getting their confirmation, their buy-in. Do they want to be part of implementing this plan? And with a resounding yes, we've got over 80 implementation partners that have agreed, separate entities. And so on each action, there are the implementation partners for that action who are ready and willing to jump in and make this happen. So what I want to do is give you 3 examples, one from each of the buckets that Ann talked about. So the first bucket is the facilitate bucket. And you can see here, and Ann described it perfectly what the buckets are for, so I won't spend a long time, but this is also in the plan itself, these pages, the facilitate page. And the example I'm going to show you is action number 5, which is on pages 50 and 51 if you're following along either virtually or in hard copy, because as your program provided the virtual link for you to download the plan, you can follow along either way. But a couple of things I want to point out. In the second paragraph under 5.1 sub-action, it says the collaborative will support the conservation and restoration of wetlands by facilitating discussions between wetland ecologists, hydrologists, land managers, decision makers, So that's one facilitative type of action that the collaborative is going to do. And then it also says that the collaborative will connect local governments in our region with other municipalities that have successfully preserved wetlands, such as Orlando. So again, it gives an example there and how we're going to move that forward in our region. In the bottom of that paragraph on this middle column, it gives an example of Bolsa Chica Wetland Restoration Project in California. I'm highlighting that to point out that we are learning not only from within our region, not only from within Florida, but from outside of Florida, what can we do to improve our resilience, and we're learning from everywhere. And then one other thing I want to point out is under 5.3, the sub-action 5.3, it mentions previously the council provided support in convening local professionals for an ecotourism and trails steering committee, and so on and so forth. So that's an example of ongoing work that we already started with the regional council that we can continue with. And throughout all of the actions in this book, we have examples of what are we already doing to make this happen. So the next example that I want us to walk through is in the guide section. And so this one is on, it's on page 64 and 65. And so this one is to encourage smart growth and building practices. A couple of things that I want to highlight about smart growth and building practices is that the collaborative will draft guidance on how to increase density in a way that reduces present and anticipated risks. So that drafting guidance, that's why this falls in the guide bucket of actions, because that's what we're going to do is, so this document says, here are some things that we're going to be providing even more details for our local governments on how they can accomplish resilience. And then it says, additionally, the collaborative will compile and summarize case studies and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of meat in these actions of what we're going to be doing. Another example that's provided from elsewhere is the city of Miami has adopted language into their comprehensive plan and land development regulations to address flooding. So again, another example from another place in Florida. And lessons learned from projects like Vacant to Vibrant will be useful for guiding efforts in Northeast Florida. So that is in action 14.4, sub-action 14.4. So again, these are things that we can learn from others and we can implement in our own region. And then the last example that I'll provide is in the analyze section. And so this one is action number 29, which is on pages 86 and 87. And on this one, in the descriptive paragraph, before you get to the sub-actions, it mentions that in 2022, the University of North Florida partnered with the city of Jacksonville to complete a heat study that showed a difference of 11.8 degrees Fahrenheit between the coolest and warmest sections of Jacksonville. That heat study can serve as an example for how we can do that for the whole region. And in the sub-action, it says that the collaborative will create and maintain a heat inventory that will build off past efforts and ongoing work to capture data on heat across the region. So again, this section, this bucket of actions here is the analyze bucket. So this is where we're collecting data in order to inform future decisions. So hopefully that gives you a little taste of one of each of the action buckets. And then if you want to see the list of all of the actions, we do have, we printed this out actually, the implementation matrix. It's on the front table if you missed it, but it is on page 96 of the document. This is all the actions. Now, and it groups them according to their category that they're listed in, and it does not give the sub-actions underneath of each one because it wouldn't fit all on one page. So, but this is kind of at a glance, like if you want to see what is the breadth of everything that's in this action plan, this is it right here. This is the breadth of it all. And then last but certainly not least, this is the moment where I want to give a huge thank you to all the collaborators. And the collaborative would not have been able to accomplish this without the help of all of these people. And they're sort of organized by their contribution level up on the slide here, but I want to call out some specific people that contributed in a very, very significant way to this RRAP. First of all, was already mentioned, Commissioner Roxanne Horvath. So I want to give her a huge thank you to providing her leadership. Thank you so much. And then I want to point out some of our writing content and project design team. So some of the people that were really doing all the actual writing of this content. Ms. Apurva Jam with our regional council back here. And Dr. Jennifer Hinton with the City of Jacksonville, who was not able to make it today, unfortunately, but I could not go without calling her name because she was instrumental in putting together the content for this document. And the design, I would be remiss without calling out Ms. Allison Boss with the City of Jacksonville for her excellent design. Made this document look so pretty so that we could print it without much effort, and we really appreciate that. And then I want to point out our leads of our subcommittees. Mr. James Richardson is here. He's the lead of our Environment Subcommittee. We also have the leaders of our Economic Resilience Committee. We had one, and then she moved to another part of the state, and then we have another one. So Ms. Maven Rogers was not able to make it today, but she was our first subcommittee chair for that group. And then we have Ms. Alia Anjarwala, and I don't know, is she here today? I don't think she's here. But anyway, I wanted to point out those leaders of our subcommittees. And then I would also like to point out our staff support for our subcommittees. They were the nuts and bolts, taking notes at every session and working with our subcommittee leads to make these subcommittees really facilitate. And so we have Mr. Andrew Prokopiak with the Regional Council, who is not here today. And then we have Ms. Cassidy Taylor, who's here in the back, who is here today, who facilitated that. And last but certainly not least, I would like to thank our fearless leader, Ms. Beth Payne, and our Deputy CEO, Eric Anderson, who is not here, for their guidance on pulling this whole thing together for us. So thank you so much. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about the next steps and some very brief closing remarks. So the next steps, as was alluded to in the presentation, phase 3. So I think Ann talked a little bit about metrics and what those are for. Those are for us to be able to know, did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish? How much of it did we accomplish? And so we're going to be establishing metrics in phase 3. We're also going to be establishing where we can get the funding for these things. And one of these, actually 2 of these, we've already applied for 2 grants that are related to actions that are in this action plan. One we applied for a couple of months ago, and then one we are working on right now that is due at the end of the month. And so we're already working on getting the funding to put these actions into place. So this is not just a book to sit on a shelf. And then the third is resources. So some of the resources are already listed in the document, but we're going to be even more thorough in providing what are the things that will help us accomplish these objectives or these actions that we put in this book, because we need to use all the resources that are at our disposal. So that is what the next phase 3 is going to be about. The time frame for that is this fiscal year, which started in October and will go through next year. And as I mentioned, implementation can be simultaneous with phase 3. We don't have to wait until phase 3 is done before we actually start rolling up our sleeves and doing the work. We're already starting on some of these sub-actions, and we're going to continue moving forward full speed ahead. So I'd like to invite those who have not already joined our Resilient First Coast Collaborative. Please go, if you're interested, you can go to Resilient First Coast, sign up. Another thing that if you're interested in having your organization sign on as an official partner with the collaborative, we have a partnership form that you can sign, and then you can be an official partner with your organization as well. So we would invite you to do both of those things. And with that, that's all of our program today, but we do have some time available for networking and for if you want to ask questions of our speakers, they'll be around here for you to ask questions, or if you have any comments or anything like that, we're more than happy. And thank you so much for coming. We're really excited about this. And with that, that's the last slide. Thank you.